Hi, Lou here, and I'm going to talk about landmines. Now, I talked recently about the game Empire Deluxe Enhanced Edition and the probabilities there. Well, one of the features in Empire Deluxe is that you can have your engineers plant landmines, which the other players are not going to see. I have turned that off because I find landmines to be rather frustrating. They can appear sort of randomly here, there, and the other place, and in that game, they blow up entire units. They don't just degrade a unit or slow it down or block it. They blow up an entire unit. There are no sea mines, strangely enough, even though sea mines are used quite a bit in warfare, just as landmines. And of course, many of us who are old enough remember when Windows came with a game called Minesweeper. I don't believe the latest versions do. Um, and you tried to deduct where mines were, but sometimes you just had to guess, and sometimes you got blown up, and then you lost the game. Now, in Ukraine, which is what brought this all to mind, there are lots and lots of areas covered with mines. It's even possible to use artillery to spread mines. There's an American artillery shell that contains 8 or 9 mines, and when it hits, it spreads those mines around. Now, those mines are visible, but maybe not so visible to people inside vehicles, and so they still can end up knocking out vehicles. Um, if you had a drone spotting for you, you would spot those mines. But of course, what happens in Ukraine is the drones spot the enemy having been slowed down by mines or having one of their vehicles hit a mine. And while they're sitting there, the very precise Ukrainian artillery zeroes in and blasts the rest of them, or as many of them as they can get before they run away. The Ukrainians tend to use Humvees and similar Jeep-like, pickup truck-like vehicles to move very fast on attack. But the Russians tend to follow the roads, and so it's even easier to mine where they're going. The Russians are much slower on artillery calls to the rear to get the artillery to zero in when, say, Ukrainians are stopped by landmines. So landmines work out pretty well for the Ukrainians. Now, it's always been this way, except that we lacked the drones and the precise artillery. In World War II, anti-tank mines, for example, took out 22.1% of tanks, according to a British survey after the war. 22.1%. Think about that. Now, to my mind, mines kind of ruined generalship because of the randomness of it. Although in Ukraine, it's not so much random as the Russians have not adjusted and done things differently. And of course, commercial war games are much more about generalship than they are about warfare. I cannot think of many commercial war games where minefields play a big part. I started to design once and got fairly far along on a game about the Battle of El Alamein. And I found that both sides would mine areas, and then for all practical purposes, they just didn't go through them because it was too dangerous for the tanks. And so the minefields became obstacles that were important in how things were positioned and where units could go. But most games don't include landmines because the effect sort of gets amalgamated in with a lot of other things. And so it doesn't need to be represented individually. Now, of course, if you get to a tactical game and there are mines involved, then perhaps you have to recognize that mines can be very important. But in a tactical game covering a small area, as tactical games generally do, you're less likely to have mines around. So to me, landmines and sea mines for that matter, even though I haven't talked about them, slow everything down. And that's good, not good for a game about generalship. So I tend not to use them. But if you're going to be realistic. If you're going to reflect everything that goes on, keep in mind that 22.1% of anti-tank mines killing tanks, according to that British survey. Landmines are very dangerous. Thanks for listening.